We've passed together through stages 1, 2, and 3 of faith development over the last 3 weeks. And today, instead of moving on to stage 4, what I want to talk about is what sometimes is referred to the liminal space, or that threshold space between stages 3 and stages 4 and stage 4, because that space is one of the most important and powerful transformational moments in the life of a person of faith. It is a challenging and difficult place to live. El cambio y la transición de la etapa 3 y la etapa 4, esa transición es uno de los más agudos y difíciles en la vida de un creyente. We talked about, again, reminding you how we can grow old without growing mature, right? Aging is obligatory, maturity is optional. Aging is obligatory, maturity is optional. And stage 3, this transition from stage 3 to stage 4 is one of the places where that comes very, very powerfully into play. Because what has to happen in stage 3 is that when we pass through a moment where every piece of order that we have constructed in our lives up until that point starts to fall apart, somebody in our life needs to be present to help us through that crisis so we don't go back to an earlier stage. Because that is what most people will do. We go back to the place of security and comfort. We're not willing to push through the ambiguities, the confusion, the frustration, the fear, and the pain that this transition from stage 3 to stage 4 require of us. What is beginning to happen in this transition is that we are beginning to move from a dual consciousness, an either or, right and wrong, us and them, we're right, you aren't consciousness. That is always differentiating and defining yourself over against those around you, into a place where you begin to take pieces from differing perspectives, perspectives that in your earlier moments of stages 1, 2, and 3 might have been seen as the enemy, or the opposition, or the other. And we begin to recognize that there are pieces of those perspectives that are valuable and that are worth having. And we begin to gather those together in an effort to shape our own belief system, personally, individually, what I believe in the light of what I have experienced and what I have gone through. So, the process of going from stage 3, which is that stage when we accept the inherited faith, the faith that our parents gave us, the faith that our church has taught us, the faith that comes through our confessions and through our catechisms. And we begin to say, I'm not sure I believe that. Because it seems to me if I believe that, then that's inconsistent with this over here. And that feels like something I don't want to do. What sets us up for the ability to do this? John Piaget, in his conversation, or in his discoveries and articulation of cognitive development in children, talks about the movement into what I was describing with the kids, what's called formal operational stage. The stage in our cognitive development when we begin to develop the capacity to think logically. We begin to develop the capacity to think about concepts that are not concrete. We begin to think about concepts that are like justice and truth and wisdom and concepts that are beyond a concrete actual thing. It's the period of time that develops in middle to late adolescence as we go into college and we're faced with professors who challenge us with ideas and perspectives that have never been a part of our lives. we begin to struggle with how to integrate all of these different things with one another. The formal operational stage is also the stage where we begin to move beyond the trial and error way of learning and begin to anticipate what different paths might help us understand more effectively. And at the ego level, what's happening for us is we're beginning to realize that even though I am a student in class, a boyfriend to my girlfriend, a son to my mother and father, a brother to my siblings, there is still a me that is in charge of all those different roles in my life. And that's what is referred to as the ego, the me that manages all of these different roles that I have in my life. There's this central me that is one person, right? Even though I'm all these different people out here. And I may function a little differently in all those arenas. The way I function with my friends might be different from the way I function at work, or the way I function with my family. The way I treat my husband might be a little different from the way I treat my children, or the way I treat my neighbors. The things that operate within me, the things I need to do, the choices that I need to make, the values that I use to make those choices might be a little different. But there's still a me that's different from all of those rules. That's more than all of those rules. And that is an experience of union, okay? A unity in the midst of the diversity. Can you see that? Does that make sense? There's a unity, there's a wholeness, there's a singularity that is bigger than all these little separate roles that I have. So what begins to happen at this stage is we move from this either-or place to a place where we begin to gather things together into a whole. And the rest of the trajectory of the spiritual life and of spiritual development is to move toward a greater increasing sense of the whole and of my participation in that whole. That I belong to that whole. So we're going to see as we unravel the 4th, 5th, and 6th stages how we increasingly move from a place of differentiation, either-orness, right and wrongness, to a place of increasing, I am part of a whole that is bigger than me, and that is bigger than that, and that is bigger than that. And I am part of that, and it is part of me. We're moving toward that awareness that Jesus articulated as, I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and if you are in me, you are in the Father too. You see how that's all together? Everything comes together in one whole. That's where we're headed. We're headed to that kind of union. But we're not there yet. We're still in this place of trying to figure out the me. And if I don't know who me is, then I don't have a me to give to the whole. And so we're trying to put that me together. And in the faith development place, what happens right now at this stage, between moving from stage 3 to stage 4, is we experience fracture points where the inherited faith that has been given to us falls apart for some reason. It is sometimes internal awarenesses that cause that fracturing to begin to happen. For example, it may be an awareness that I really don't agree with some of what I'm being taught by my Sunday school teacher or by my pastor. I don't really agree with that. I think differently from him or her. That's an internal awareness of difference, okay? Of disagreement with what is being shared as the inherited tradition. Another internal awareness can be the awareness that, okay, my community says that if I am a member of this community, I should behave in this way. Blah, blah, blah. For example, if you grew up in a tradition where, as my former mother-in-law used to say, we don't smoke and we don't chew and we don't go with girls that do, right? And then you discover that you like to smoke, there's a fracture, all right? I like to do something that my community says I shouldn't do. An internal awareness of a fracture point. So there's these internal things that happen to us that begin to create this separation of self from the identity of the whole group. Then there are external things that happen as well. I can encounter someone who is from the other, people that are going to hell, right? I encounter one of those folks, one of the folks who's in the people I shouldn't hang out with group, and I discover them to be really cool people, or a wonderful human being, who I really actually would like to get to know. And all of a sudden, the rule of my community that says you shouldn't be with people like that feels wrong, because it seems to be judging someone unfairly who is not part of that group. All right? And so there's a fracture place. There's a disruption in that sense of clarity. And another thing that can happen is that the laws of my community, the legal expectations, the rules of behavior of my community don't seem to accurately explain what I'm observing in the world. They seem to be inadequate. And that inadequacy begins to disrupt my internal sense of security and comfort and confidence in all of what I'm being handed. Okay? Now, most of us, not all of us, but most of us begin that kind of process sometime in our young adult life. You guys in the Dwell community, you're like right pow in the middle of that time of your life, all right? And what happens in your Dwell experience is you're thrown into a house where you have to live with people who don't all think the same way that you do, don't all behave the same way that you do. And you're trying to figure out, can I like this? Is this person even possible to like? Much less live with in harmony? As we move into college, if we go to college, or if we move into work, if we take a vocation and begin to work, we're in a work environment with people who may think and believe differently from us. And we have to figure out, can I get along with them? What if what they're doing, can I say, okay, that's all right, I can get along, that's okay. And what if that just continues to grate on me? And what does that tell me about myself? All of those encounters begin to shake us up. And when they shake us up, especially when they begin to challenge our convictions of our faith, we can get very, very uncomfortable. Typically, many, many young adults will look at their faith as it was inherited, and they'll look at what they're experiencing and observing, and those internal and external influences, and they'll go, forget it, this is ridiculous. And they walk away from the church. And they never come back. Because they've never taken the step into the fourth level, which is the creation of a faith posture, a faith position that is my own construction. That is my own construction. Taking from the pieces that I've inherited and the pieces I'm discovering, both within myself and outside of myself, and crafting something that is my own. That stage, that fourth stage, is called individuative reflective faith. Individual reflective faith. I've thought about it, I've reflected on it, I've come to my own conclusions, I've made it my own. It's mine now. It's what I believe and stand on. Now, that's an important step to get to, but it is a hard process to hammer out. And often what we do is fall back out of that ambiguity and the struggle to make that faith our own. We fall back into something more comfortable, or we ditch it altogether. Those are the two options that are most common, to ditch it altogether or to fall back into a very convenient package instead of hammering it out. Now, in the church, in the Christian community, especially within communities like ours where we baptize babies, all right? We baptize children and claim that they belong to God. We claim that they have been God's all along, that there's nothing they can do that can get out of God, that it's a grace and a wonderful gift that they've been given a community of faith that can help nurture them and raise them in the faith, and that is all true. But we also recognize that at some point down the road, that kid whose parents and congregation made vows for him or for her has to take that faith on personally and say, yeah, I, Rob Mueller, want to be a follower of Jesus in this community or in another community. Not just because my parents have dragged me here, not just because it's what most of the people in my culture do, not just because it's been my family's generational participation in a congregation's life, but I want to do this because I personally claim this faith as my own. Now, in our tradition, confirmation process, which we're doing with some of the kids right now, is the institutional way in which we attempt for that to happen. But I'm going to be very blunt and honest with you. I really believe that almost none of the kids who go through confirmation really, in the process of confirmation, are making that faith their own. And a good example of that. Just this week, a son of this church came to me and said, I want to be baptized. I've been baptized, I was baptized as a kid, but I never, this whole Christian thing never became mine. And now in his 40s, after going through 2 relationships and 2 divorces and having the world fall apart in many ways, he has all of a sudden said, I need to put this faith together for myself. I need to make sense of what's going on here. And I know God is the key to that. And so I want to claim in this moment of my life that I am beginning this journey again. And I want to start with this act of baptism. And so I'm confessing to you here because this is one of my experiences of kind of where the institution fails us. Presbyterians are not supposed to rebaptize. One baptism is good, for all time, right? There was nothing in me that was capable of saying no to him institutionally on that. I just said, you know what? Let's go. And so we went out to my cabin and we jumped in the Guadalupe River and I baptized him. And if the church higher-ups want to crucify me for that, I'm going to let them do it. Because I believe that that was his confirmation of the faith he had been taught and baptized in many years before. And I couldn't deny it. It was absolutely clear. He was laying hold of the faith as his own for the first time in his life at 40 years old, after everything fell apart. Richard Rohr says, and I think he's absolutely right, and this is exactly what I've experienced. He says, institutions cannot, by nature of being institutions, move beyond a stage 3 faith development. Institutions cannot. Because institutions are required to have rules and regulations and guidelines and structures. And those structures that define the institution, that give it its identity, the books of order, and the other similar things that are part of those institutions, those things keep institutions from being able to move into individuative, reflective faith. So the rest of these journeys, the rest of this journey of faith is going to be a journey you take on your own. With a church around you, and with people who love you and support you, but you are going to have to take that journey on your own. The whole church is not going to be able to come along with you on that. Some of the church may. Some of the members of the church may. But you're not going to be taking that journey with everybody. Because the church as a whole can only make it so far. We can help people get to this certain place, and then from that point, you got to take the reins of it. You got to take responsibility for it. You got to move it yourself with God. Israel, well, the psalm that we have in front of us today, Psalm 6. I picked Psalm 6 because I think it articulates the cries of someone who's in this place of disintegration. It's somebody who's in a place where things are falling apart. Lord, don't rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Be merciful, I am faint. Heal me, my bones are in agony, my soul is in anguish. How long? Lord, how long am I going to have to be this way? Turn and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. I love this line. You know, no one remembers you when they're dead. Who can praise you from the grave? You realize at this stage in Israel's development, the idea of an afterlife was not there. They didn't have that. You died, you died. That was it. You're down to the place of the dead. The development of that concept for us in faith emerged later. I'm worn out from my groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping. I drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow because of all my foes. Away from me, all you who do evil, for the Lord has finally heard my weeping. So this psalm begins with that brokenness, and then finally there's a resolution. We don't know how long it took. A long time. Because for quite a while that psalmist was saying, how long, O Lord? How long? How long? How long do I have to wait for you to come here and hear my cry and do something for me? How long did the Israelites have to cry out to God under Pharaoh's hardships before finally there was an answer and Moses responded? I've always wondered how many times God asked somebody else to go talk to Pharaoh and they said, no, get somebody else. Until Moses finally said yes. We don't have a record of that. But God's always about inviting us to help make things happen that need to happen. In Israel's development as a community of faith, they developed into an institutional religious community with a temple and with a priesthood and with institutional regulations that were part of their whole community's way of living out their faith. And then what happened? Then came the Babylonians and destroyed the temple and took away the leadership and ran all of them up to Babylon, where they had to re-figure out how to be a Jew in the midst of a foreign land. And it wasn't easy. That was when the birth of the Pharisees occurred among the Jewish people. The folks who preserved the laws, all right? So here comes the crisis. Remember what I said? You go back to something that you can establish that's comfortable and familiar. The Pharisees emerge and create a legal structure, an obedience to the law, which becomes a way for the Jews to be Jews in a foreign place. But you have right alongside that, you have right alongside the development of the Pharisees, Jeremiah saying, marry the Babylonians, seek the good of the city that you are now in, and become part of the community that you've gone to, become part of this nation. You have two opposing ways to deal with the same crisis. One that pushes forward through the diversity and into a new union with the Babylonian reality, and another that recedes and clamps down upon the legal structure of Judaism. And that's exactly what happens with us. The institution pulls back, but the individuals, the prophets in this case, push forward. Churches will be conservators, even the most progressive ones will be conservators of tradition. And it will be harder for us sometimes to move forward in our faith when we know that not everybody in the church comes with us. 3 churches in our presbytery right now can't move forward. And they can't let others move forward. Because the changes in our church's policies at the national level around marriage and homosexuality really just give permission to the churches that want to go in that direction to be able to do so without being constrained. It doesn't require anybody that doesn't want to do that. But there are churches who cannot tolerate other people being tolerant. And so they want to leave. They want to leave. That's the pullback. The push forward is where faith development and growth really will happen. So, what are the lessons that we can learn in this transition place between stage 3 and stage 4? The first is that life is not black and white, but gray. And that there are places of ambiguity and confusion that we are going to have to accept if we're going to move forward with some honesty about the way life really is. And we need to also be able to learn that I don't have to have absolute certainty in order to go forward. I can live personally with some ambiguity about what's right and what isn't. And that maybe I know, but maybe I don't know. And that's okay. Second thing from this transition is that each of us has a responsibility, if we're going to move forward, to try and test what we've inherited and decide what we're going to take and what we're not. As we move forward, what am I going to take and what am I going to leave behind? When I do premarital counseling with folks, I have them do that very same thing in reflecting upon the relationships of their parents. You know, you grew up in a marriage. You grew up in a marriage where there were certain ways in which affection was shown and not. There were certain ways in which money was handled and not. There were certain roles and responsibilities within that. So as you move into your marriage, what of those examples are you going to keep and what are you going to throw away? What are you going to emulate and what are you going to do different? Conscious decision to make something my own. And the last piece that we need to learn is the discipline of being able to let go of things freely so that we can move forward without that baggage. And that letting go process, which really begins in earnest as we move from stage 3 to stage 4, is the life lesson that becomes deeper and deeper and harder as we move into more mature stages of faith. Because ultimately, the last great task of our human life is to let go. To let go into God. To let go and join with God again. So, hard time between 3 and 4. A time that will tempt you to pull back and put things in a more secure and comfortable place. But if you can live with the ambiguity, the gray areas, test and try and make things your own, you will move forward into a place that allows you to claim your faith as something really, truly, and perhaps the first time, your own. Let's pray. Gracious God, amoroso Dios, gracias por la oportunidad que nos presentas en la vida humana, de aprender y tomar de las tradiciones ricas y fructíferas que hemos recibido de herencia. Pero danos la gracia también de poder ver las limitaciones que estas mismas tradiciones nos ofrecen. Permítenos el valor de medir y escoger, de tomar responsabilidad por nuestra propia fe, para que sea una fe viva y verdadera. En el nombre de Cristo Jesús que lo pedimos.